I'm halfway up a ladder carving an owl from a jagged piece of dead oak when Denise Apprentice storms into my yard with 2 board members following behind her like soldiers in khaki formation. She's wearing pearls, carrying a clipboard, and radiating an aura of lemon cleaner and authority. She announces loudly, "Victor Hale, the HOA ordered removal, not a pagan skyline." The owl's woodchip eyebrow I just carved falls to the ground like a dramatic statement. Somewhere behind me, I hear a neighbor gasp and drop what sounds like a LaCroix can. My name is Victor Hale. I teach high school shop class, sleep like a rock, and collect quiet hobbies like whittling, drinking black coffee, and ignoring group texts. My property sits in Alder Run, a subdivision where garage doors seem to gossip with each other and everyone has the same beige deck stain. The HOA is steered by Denise Apprentice, a woman who says the word Decorum like it personally owes her money. A storm killed the old oak tree in my front yard last spring. The city arborist came out, checked it thoroughly, and declared it safe to leave the trunk as a monolithic stump with no limb hazard, as long as I kept it stable and maintained. I asked around for removal quotes from chainsaw guys. They chuckled at the size of the stump and gave me prices that sounded more like down payments on a car. So I did what seemed like the reasonable thing at the time. I bought some chisels and decided to turn the stump into a weekend project. Denise left a notice on my door that read, "Tree must be removed within 72 hours, in bold letters. It was printed on paper thick enough to bounce coins off of. I emailed her back with a scanned copy of the arborist's note explaining that the trunk was structurally sound and removal was optional. She replied within an hour saying, "Optional for the city, not for Alder Run. We value uniformity here." Uniformity apparently meant staking 2 volunteers with tape measures on my lawn at dawn to audit what she called Totem progress. I caught Denise peering through my fence slats one morning like some kind of suburban velociraptor hunting for violations. She photographed my wood shavings, circled the pile in red pen with a note that said, "Excessive wood debris," and actually fined me $50 for displaying religious iconography without approval. I walked out to meet her with my coffee. "I'm carving wildlife," I explained calmly. "Squirrels, owls, a salmon leaping upstream." She squinted at my salmon sketch like it had personally offended her. "That is clearly a pagan eel," she declared with absolute certainty. The next week, I added a fox, a bear with a wise expression, and just for spite, a tiny raccoon holding what looked like a miniature HOA handbook. The neighborhood started slowing down to admire my work. Joggers would stop and clap. Dog walkers would pause and take photos. A couple of kids dropped fan mail in my mailbox with notes like, "Do the raccoon again but make him look more judgmental," and, "Can you add a dragon?" My mom says no, but I say yes. I pinned the notes to my workshop wall. Denise saw the growing support and her fines increased. Suddenly I was being cited for excessive creative activity visible from the street, whatever that meant. She sent me a bill for $250. I framed it next to the kids' drawings. She escalated to letters stamped "Final Warning" in red ink, despite the fact that it was actually warning number 4. Each letter grew more desperate in tone, citing obscure covenants about visual pollution and unauthorized monuments. Denise brought actual muscle to the situation. She hired a crew with a rented stump grinder and scheduled what she called a surprise compliance visit. They stepped onto my lawn at 6 in the morning with their diesel equipment coughing and rumbling. I walked out with my coffee and a copy of the Alder Run Covenants and Conditions document. I'd read it thoroughly. Nowhere did it say dead trees must be removed. It specifically said hazardous limbs and unsightly debris. My trunk was art at this point, and it was safer than Denise's stiletto heels on my sloped lawn. When the crew fired up their grinder, I calmly pulled out my phone and called the city arborist. He arrived 20 minutes later in a neon vest with the patience of someone who deals with municipal disputes daily. "There's no removal order from us," he stated clearly. "And ma'am, you cannot enter his property without permission or proper authority." Denise lied swiftly and confidently. "We have emergency authority under HOA guidelines," she insisted, clutching her clipboard like a shield. The arborist radioed in a code enforcement officer. When he arrived, he asked to see a written emergency declaration. Denise produced a form that she had signed herself. The officer's eyebrow went up so high it practically needed FAA clearance. Turns out that pretending your clipboard outranks actual property law is a spectacularly bad idea when you're standing in front of real officials. The code enforcement officer cited HOA trespass rules and told the crew to stand down immediately. The arborist walked around my monolith, tapped it with his knuckles, and nodded approvingly. "It's solid construction. And frankly, it's neat work," he said with genuine appreciation. He wrote a letter on the spot stating that the trunk posed no hazard and qualified as decorative sculpture under residential art provisions. I posted that letter on a wooden stake in my yard like it was a neighborhood treaty. Denise actually hissed when she saw it. I'm not exaggerating. She made a hissing sound, then sent a mass email to the entire subdivision describing my totem as a looming idol encouraging wildlife loitering and neighborhood discord. Wildlife loitering was already happening, and honestly, it was delightful. Birds perched on the carved branches. Kids came by to draw pictures and leave little offerings of acorns and pine cones at the base. A local photographer even asked if she could do senior portraits by my bear's carved snout. Word spread beyond Alder Run. A small article appeared in the community section of the newspaper with the headline, "Local Teacher's Tree Art Divides Neighborhood." The reporter interviewed me, Denise, and several neighbors. Denise's quote read, "This sets a dangerous precedent for individual expression over collective harmony." My neighbor Gary's quote read, "It's a tree. He carved it nice. Denise needs a hobby." Denise tried a zoning angle next, claiming my totem violated height restrictions for decorative structures. The zoning office sent an inspector who measured it, consulted his book, and informed Denise that living trees don't count toward structure height limits, and neither do carved stumps on their original root system. She tried citing community standards, but the community was firmly against her now. People started showing up with camping chairs to watch me carve on Saturday mornings like it was dinner theater. Someone brought donuts one weekend. An elderly woman named Margaret brought me lemonade and told me stories about her late husband who used to whittle. I gave the carved raccoon a tiny donut in its paws. Margaret photographed it and it became a minor local meme. Desperate and clearly losing control of the narrative, Denise orchestrated what I can only describe as a midnight mission. She and two other board members, Karen Sullivan and Bob Hendricks, snuck onto my property with tarps and industrial gray paint, attempting to what her planning email later called neutralize the spectacle. My Ring doorbell caught absolutely everything in crisp high-definition video. Their whispered tactical discussions about which animal to paint first. Denise's pearls clacking against the paint cans as she bent down. Karen struggling to open the paint can with a screwdriver because they forgot a proper paint opener. Bob suggesting maybe they should reconsider this plan, and Denise hissing at him to be quiet and stay focused. Then the spectacular finale when Bob tripped over my garden hose, went down like a sack of potatoes, and sent paint splashing across the lawn in a gray arc that looked like modern art. They managed to apply a single mournful smear of gray across my fox's face before my motion sensor lights detonated the yard into artificial daylight bright enough to land aircraft. I stepped out onto my porch with my phone camera recording and used the same tone I reserve for freshmen who think the table saw is merely a suggestion. "Good evening, committee members," I said calmly. I uploaded the video to the neighborhood social media group. It hit 400 views by breakfast. The comments were absolute poetry. "Vandalism isn't decorum, Denise. Is gray paint a pagan eel? This is what happens when Karens get clipboards." The city cited all three of them for criminal trespass and property damage. The HOA's insurance company balked at covering what their adjuster called unsanctioned nocturnal art remediation. A reporter from the Sycamore County Gazette picked up the story and called my totem Alder Run's accidental landmark. The article included screenshots from my doorbell footage and a glamour shot of my raccoon giving side eye to the camera. 2 weeks later, the HOA held a special meeting in the clubhouse. There were store-bought cookies, tepid lemonade, and enough tension to cut with a knife. Over 90 residents showed up, which was 3 times the normal attendance. People stood along the walls because there weren't enough chairs. Denise sat at the front table looking pale and rigid, her clipboard in front of her like a shield. The board president pro tem read the charges: criminal trespass, property damage, abuse of HOA authority, and misrepresentation of emergency powers. 3 residents spoke on my behalf, including Margaret with her raccoon photo. 2 people spoke for Denise, but their arguments were weak and mostly about maintaining order. By a vote of 43-6, the board removed Denise as president, barred her from any enforcement roles for 3 years, and assigned her to beautification duty under direct supervision. The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. Her face went completely white as the votes were tallied. She stood up slowly, her clipboard trembling in her hands, and walked out without saying a single word. The room erupted in applause the moment the door closed behind her.